Okay, so to make an environment dome, we need to consider that we don't want to actually see the seams of the dome. So the first thing we would do is go to create polygon primitives, sphere. I just really like spheres. They're already dome shaped. In fact, I'm going to go to the front view and hit 4 so I can see through. And I'm not going to need the bottom of this sphere. So this is the one case where I am going to let you guys delete, because we're not going to really be shaping this. It's going to stay as a dome shape. And notice that I didn't delete all the way up to here because I want the environment to go down below the horizon, and I don't want to see a blank space where there's no dome and there's no ground space. So I'm going to grab a little bit lower, maybe to right here, and delete these keys or these faces. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the top. And if you're creating a sky where if your character is looking up and you see a starry sky, maybe you want to keep that. I'm not sure. But if you don't need all this dome, I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. I'm going to go to the top view. And I don't need a full 360-degree view. So I'm going to take, see, my character is not selectable. Okay. So I'm going to take, let's just take this stuff. I don't know, maybe to there. And I'll hold down Shift and grab the rest of these that I missed and delete those. All right, so here's my dome. And if I hit 6, you can see this dome is really small for him. It's way too small. So I just scale it up. And I'll put in a ground plane also. So before I do that, I'm going to name this dome, or I'll call it environment dome, ENV for environment, dome underscore GEO for geometry. And I probably don't need to make any other changes to this. So I'm going to go ahead and say modify freeze transformations, edit, delete by type history. And then I'll put it on a layer. ENV dome layer. Okay, so I can turn that off and on, and most likely I'm just going to restrict it so I don't accidentally grab it. But I also need to create an environment for this dome. So like I've shown before, I need to assign a material to this. So it's already, if I go to materials, you can see that it's already set to be default Lambert 1, which we don't want. So right click and hold. I don't want it to be a shiny dome. So I'm going to say assign new material. I'm going to say Lambert, and I'm going to call this ENV dome underscore shader. I'm going to hit enter. I don't have, I could assign it a texture, and it's going to stretch. So you have to be careful that your texture is shaped like this or something similar to this. But for now, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hit color, and I'm going to give it sort of a sky color. Maybe something in here. Let's see. Maybe more blue. Something in there, maybe less gray, more like a sky dome. So there's my sky dome. And my ground plane, I would add some kind of a, I don't know, I'll say a ground plane and just scale this out so it's big enough. So I want to make sure that I don't see where the intersection is between I don't want to see, in other words, I don't want to see that there's any missing space out here with the ground plane and the dome. So I'm just going to scale this up. And I would, put some kind of a ground texture, whether it's chessboard or your desert or whatever. So your camera is going to be working. Oops, so of course with a ground plane, I would put that on a layer, name it, and just everything I do with a dome. But your camera, you're going to position your camera in a way that you see what you need to in your shot. You're staging your camera in a way that you see as much environment as you need to, or the ground plane that you need to, your characters. You want to be careful you're not underneath the ground. So to create a camera, you go to Create, Cameras, Camera, and these are your shots. So if I pull this camera away, I'm actually going to split my screen because I have this camera selected, but and I'm working in my perspective view, but you also want to create a look through this actual camera that I've selected. So if I say Panels, Look Through Selected, this is what the camera is actually seeing right now. If I zoom out, I'm just repositioning that camera to better stage my performance. And then once I'm happy with where that camera is, I'm going to go ahead and lock it. So first I have to have the camera selected. And then in the channel box, I select through the names of the attributes. I right click and hold, and this menu comes up, and then I say lock selected. And when I do that, you can see that there's gray in front of the numbers. That means I can't move it. So I can still move my perspective camera, but if I want to move my camera that I'm shooting to, my actual shot camera, I cannot because I've locked it. So I have to unlock it before I can move it again. And maybe I don't want to move it, but once you have your camera set, that's how you lock it and unlock it. So that's the environment and camera. So the other thing we needed to build was a room. So let's say we want to create some walls for this space. We'll just use this ground plane as a floor, but I'm going to say modify, or I'm sorry, create polygon primitives. I'm going to say cube, and most walls are at least 8 to 12 inches thick. Let's say his foot is 12 inches. So I'm going to scale this up a little bit. So maybe it's about the thickness of his foot. And I'm going to scale it long ways too. But before I do that, I'm going to change the width and height. So I'll give it, I don't know, let's say 4 in each of those categories. The other thing I need to do, go to the front view, hit 4. I need to change the center pivot. So I hit W, hold down D and V as in Victor, snap it to the bottom. Now I let go, and I'm gonna hold down X so it snaps to the grid. So now the floor is right on the ground plane. I hit 6. So let's make this a window. So I want to keep the, let's say the Z, I'm going to keep that as 1.5, but the other ones I'm going to scale them up. So I'm going to scale up my Y to make like the window is maybe at his hip height, and then I'm going to scale the X so it's wide enough to be a window. So there's my thickness. I can hit Control D as in dog, and hit W. Let me turn off my box for a second so we can see through this. I'm going to drag this over. Now, the character is right in the middle of the window, so I'm just kind of using him as a reference. But I want this wall to be butted. I mean, I could kind of eyeball this, but I want it to be exact. So I'm going to hit 4. I'm going to zoom down here and change my center pivot from this point to this vertex. So I'm going to hold down D and V as in Victor. And now I snapped it to that intersection. Now I let go. Now I can move this next wall piece and butt it right up against that flush. So I hold down the V again, and I drag this X-axis line. So now if I hit 6, I can see that those walls are perfectly lined up. I'm going to stand it up taller. So I'm going to scale this one. Yeah, maybe I'll scale it that tall. I'm just kind of eyeballing this. This wall, I'm just going to copy this. Control D to copy. I hit W, and I'm going to drag this up, and this is going to be the top part. In fact, I could do the same thing to line these up here. I'm going to hold down D and V and snap this to that vertex, and I'm going to snap it to that There we go. So it's kind of a tight window. I'm going to shorten the window a little bit. Or I'm sorry, make the window bigger and make this wall piece above the window smaller. So maybe I don't want to, I guess I could. I was going to just mirror this over, but I can also just Control D, drag it over here. And I could mirror it, or I could just change the center pivot again to this point, and then hold down V and snap it. So there's my wall. If I want to make a door, maybe this wall is a little bit skinnier because I'm going to make a door on the other side of the thread. So I'll just duplicate this guy and snap it to that. And that's a really wide door, so I need to scale this down quite a bit, maybe that big. Maybe I'll duplicate this and move it over here. But I want to snap to that corner at the top. Hold down D and V, drag it up to the top, and hold down V by itself, and then it snaps there. So there's my room, and you can see that as I select these, their geometry is clean. We're only working with polygons and, four-sided. The only issue that we would have is if I wanted to texture this, like if I wanted to put some kind of a stucco texture on all these walls, because these are different. I'm going to select all the walls for a second. Oh, not the ground. Sorry. So you can see that these squares are all different sizes because I scaled them and I was moving them around. I wasn't paying attention to how they relate to each other. I can combine these objects, but if I wanted to put a texture, like something like I don't know, a wood texture or a stucco texture, because these squares are different shapes, they're gonna be stretched long here and they're gonna be stretched wide here. They're just gonna vary, and all of a sudden, you're gonna have a very messy looking texture. So if you just wanted to paint these all one color, you could just say combine these all. So there's your wall, and then assign a new material like we've been doing. And I'm not going to have these shiny walls. They're just going to be Lambert 3. So I'm going to call these wall underscore SHDR. So this shader, I know maybe I'll make it like an eggshell color. So grab this and make it more of a yellowish in here, and then drag in here. So there's your eggshell white. I don't know. Anyway, so there's your wall. And you could put a sill, you can add some more geometry. You can make a door, a little threshold, a door jamb and all that stuff. I don't want you guys to go super crazy trying to make an accurate house. For the window, I mean, you could add maybe a couple of little panes in here. And then, yeah, so you just build your four walls the way I did. Let's say you Control D, duplicated this and moved it over to this side. I don't know, maybe we'll rotate it and change the center pivot again. Oh, I got to make it 90 degrees because I actually want it to line up. Hold down or hit W for moving. I'm going to hold down D and V to change the center pivot to this corner. Or you know what? I need the outer corner. So I'm going to go over here, hold down D and V and snap it to that corner. Now I hold down V by itself and I drag it to snap to this wall. So now there's two walls. You have two doors, two windows, and I could just keep doing this. Of course, at some point, maybe I want to change up the walls, but just for the sake of filling this house up, I'm just gonna drag it over here and then rotate it 90 degrees, or I guess, yeah, negative 90. Well, maybe positive 90. It actually wants me to say 180, so I'll put that in. And the reason it's asking me to do 180 or wants 180 instead of 90 is because I didn't freeze transformations on the other walls. If I had done that, I wouldn't have to be figuring all this math out. And then one last wall, Control D, and hold down V, snap it over here, rotate it 90. There you go. So if this is the room that I want, I'm happy with this room. I could just take these 4 walls and freeze their transformations, and yeah, be done with my room. So that's walls. You guys also needed wires. So let me put these walls on a layer.
I got a question about the material.
Yeah.
If you got like a huge list piling up, how do you delete the previous ones that you don't need?
So yeah, we're gonna get into textures. And I've kind of postponed it because we're not going to use just the standard Maya textures. We're actually going to use Arnold textures, and you have to have you have to assign it a specific shader and that kind of thing. So let me get back to you on textures, because I don't want to get too far into textures yet.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I was going to put these on a layer. I'll call this, oops, walls, I guess, underscore LYR, walls, plural. There we go. Okay, so someone needed a wire. So the main thing with the wire, actually, this is very similar to what I would actually recommend you just watch the horn video. But just real quickly, to model it, I would take a polygon primitive cylinder, and I'm going to need a lot of, well, I don't know, the cap is maybe just 4. I won't need much for the cap. And then the height is going to be quite a bit, so maybe, I don't know, 60. And the axis, we don't, 20 is probably okay. So I'm going to scale this small, and then I'm going to scale it in the Y to make it tall. And maybe I'll turn off my guy now, he's in the way. So let me look at this. I might need more than 60. I'm going to say 100. Okay. Now I'll go to the front view. I'm going to pull this out of the ground. So I'm going to change the center pivot again, down to the bottom. I let go, and then I hold down X and drag it up. So if we're looking at the size of this guy, this wire is thicker than his arms, so I probably need to keep scaling it. So I'm just going to scale all 3 of them at once. That's probably better. And then I'll scale it in the Y by itself. I'll turn him off. So it just depends on the proportions of your characters and your environment. So this is a wire. I'm going to take a, and I'm going to do this really simply. I'm going to use maybe half as many joints as I need to for this, but just for the sake of the exercise, just to save time, I'm going to go to change from modeling to rigging. I'm going to go to skeleton and say, oh, before I do that, hold on just a second. I'm going to put this wire on a layer and call it wire underscore LYR so I can restrict it. I'm also going to name this wire LYR underscore geo. So this wire, if this is my character, that's a really tall wire, so maybe it doesn't need to be that big. So I'm going to scale it down. So maybe it's just, I don't know, I'll just leave it like his height. Anyway, so I'll turn this back off. Maybe I'll move it up just enough to get to that x-axis right there. All right, so then I go to skeleton. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot I was going to restrict the wire. And I restrict it because I don't want the skeleton to, or the wire to interfere with the skeleton I'm making. If you guys wanted to actually snap it to the vertices, you would unrestrict it. Or actually, you can restrict it, but if it's set to transparent like this, you cannot select, you can't snap to the the wire itself. So I'm gonna actually set it to restricted so I can show you what it looks like if I actually snap to the wire. 4. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna go to skeleton, create joints, and then I'm going to hold down X and then snap it to that joint. Now these are really big joints. You can make them smaller. Right here where it says radius, I'm going to set this to 0.125 and maybe even smaller. I'm going to say 0.05 or 0.06, whatever. That's better. Hold down V, and if I have V selected, it's going to snap to the, oh, hold on. You want it to be perfectly lined up. So I'm holding down V and I'm snapping it to the vertices. And you could just keep going up and doing that. I'm not going to go that specific with it because just for the sake of the exercise, I'm going to snap it to the grid instead. And this is going to make this isn't going to make as smooth of a bend in your wire, but at least you can we can get through this a little bit faster. So I'm just going to snap here to the grid itself. And who knows, if we have enough geometry, maybe it'll bend nicely. We'll see. Oops, hit Z, hold down X, and I'm snapping it. So I'm in the front view. If I go to the side view or right view, left view, you can see that it lined up in any axis because I was snapping it to the grid. All right, so with the, oh yeah, I was gonna select these, and I don't like that they're so big. And I think I can change their size all at once. So if I change this to 0.05, it should, yeah, there you go. So they're a lot smaller now. Maybe they're too small, I don't know. 0.1, there we go. And then I'm gonna unrestrict the wire. I'm gonna go to panels, layouts, 2 panes side by side, panels, hypershade, or hypergraph. And here is my wall or my wire. And then here are the wire joints. So I'm gonna select my wires, I'm sorry, the joints, and hold down Shift and select the wire geometry. And then I'm gonna go to skin, bind skin. Now, if you wanted to pose this thing out, I mean, when we get into rigging, you would actually create control handles for these because you're not gonna actually animate the joints, you animate the control handles. But you can see that you can bend this wire, and I have them all selected so they're bending nicely like a whip. If you wanted to bend them a few at a time, maybe you just grab the top few and bend it that way, and then the next few and bend it the other way. And you can start to create more, and you can bend it in the other axes too. So you can get more of a wire shape, you know, if you want to have it, you know, look like it had been positioned or whatever. And then if you don't like what it's doing, if you want to get it back to 0, you take the rotates and you 0 those out, and you're back to the starting position. So who was it that needed a wire again?
Me.
Okay.
It was me.
Sorry, I'm not seeing the pictures. Who is that?
Autumn.
Autumn. So were you going to animate your wire, or was it just a prop that you're going to?
It was just going to be a prop.
Okay, so they're just like lying on the floor?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So yeah, you can pose these out pretty easily that way, as opposed, because as long as you're not, I mean, these can be animated, but I don't want to get that far. I don't want to.
Too hard.
What's that?
It looks like it would end up being too hard and too complicated.
Yeah.
At least
yeah,
for a
just
beginner.
pose it out, and then you can just leave it there.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, good. So that's the wire. And let me just add this to that layer too. A mitt hand. Okay, so I would basically just use 2 spheres for the mitt hand. Let me actually put the ground plane on a layer too, so I can get it out of the way. Okay. Actually, let me turn on my character. He has similar. Let me turn his arms on. Hit 6. So this character, these aren't exactly mitts, but there's joints to them right here. You know, there's 1, 2, 3 joints in this. I would say even simplify it more. Just maybe 1, 2, 3 shapes. So this character has 3 for the thumb, 6 with the index, 9 with this mitt fingers, and then 10 with the palm. So I would just do palm, fingers, thumb. So 3. So let me turn him back off, and then go to create polygon primitives sphere. My favorite sphere, I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees and then flatten it. Maybe I'll look at the top view. Maybe I'll scale it a little bit. I mean, you could be a little bit more specific if maybe you wanted that shape for the mitt, but for the wrist, and then over here you wanted to flatten this out. I showed you guys how to use the sculpt geometry tool in the video. You can select some of these vertices, go to modeling, soft selection, turn that on, reduce the intensity to maybe 1, and I'll drag this in. And then maybe I'll just duplicate this. Control D, and I'll flip it around 180 degrees. And I'll reposition this. And you can have some overlap, maybe right there. I don't know, maybe this is a little bit smaller than the palm, or more narrow or something. I don't know. And I would change the center pivot. If these are the fingers, I would change it to right there in the middle of the palm so we can get a bend. So hold down D, and I'm just going to drag this to the middle. And then for the thumb, I would just I'll just take this guy and duplicate him again. Control D and move him out. And I'm going to scale this down quite a bit. Maybe rotate him around again, 180. Maybe he's too big, or not small, not big enough. And just kind of position it. So again, the thumb would rotate from the joint where it would connect to the hand. So I'm going to hold down D and just kind of position it close to there. Also, I want to reposition the mitt, the palm. I don't want it to be in the middle. I want it to be out here. So I'm going to hold down D and drag that to, maybe I'll hold down D and X and it'll snap to the grid. That's a pretty simple mitt if we look at this. And I mean, if you need to, you can create a, and I'm getting into rigging, but you can get a control handle and just rotate this down. And another control handle will rotate this down. Maybe I need to position this a little bit better also. I rotate it this way and down so that when you rotate it, it's going to rotate this way. So that would be the mitt. So let me turn these guys off. And you know, maybe you don't like the shape that I made. You can certainly change the shape. So maybe there's not so much pinching through here. Maybe it's more of a rounded shape. You just scale those out or something. But just for the sake of time, a leaf. So yeah, actually, I'm just going to turn this. I'm going to Control D this and remove it from the layer. I push it over this way. Turn off my mitt. Bring this back to 0. So I'm going to flatten it much more because leaves are generally pretty thin. Maybe I'll elongate it. I guess it depends on the kind of leaf it is. Maybe that's too thin. Give it a little bit of thickness. So I can start shaping this. Maybe I'll grab the vertices through the middle and pull them down. Oh, that's too strong. Let me change the intensity, maybe 0.5. Pull these guys down. And then I want to do the same thing to the left side that I'm doing to the right side. So I'm going to scale this also, so it kind of feels like the middle of the leaf. But I'm going to turn on the symmetry. And let's see. I'll grab these guys. Oops, sorry. It's not being symmetrical, so I need to change my symmetry to, let's try world X. Maybe it's world Z. There we go. World Z works. And maybe I'll increase this again. Or maybe instead of increasing it, I'll leave it at 50, but I'll select more of these points on the grid, on the leaf. I'm just trying to select every other one. And I can drag some of these up. Maybe some of the next ones, I'll drag those up. And this isn't going to be a beautiful leaf, but just you get an idea, it's going to feel more like a leaf. I could grab the tip of it and increase the intensity to maybe 2, and then rotate that down. Or I guess it's pulling up, but then I could just pull it down and maybe push it in a little bit. So that's more of a leaf. And you can give it a stem or something. Maybe I need to add more geometry or something. So there's a leaf. And if this is too bumpy for you, I showed you in the video, you can go to, so you select your object, you go to, oh, I got to change back to modeling, and then go to surface, sculpt geometry tool, and bring this down. Hold down B to change your paintbrush size. And then I'm going to smooth it. And I'm also going to set it to symmetry or reflection. Oops, I got to change the position to Z. Yeah. And I'm just painting these to kind of smooth them out. Maybe underneath as well. Yeah. So this is just quick and dirty, but yeah, you can spend more time to get it pretty. So that's the leaf. Put that on a leaf layer. Oh, and then of course you delete history and all that stuff. Freeze transformations. In fact, let me see. I'm in the front view. No, I'm actually in the side view. So before I froze transformations, I would rotate my leaf. In fact, I'm going to center pivot this first. Modify, center pivot, and then rotate 90 degrees. And then snap it to the center. And now I'm rotated properly. So now I can freeze transformations. Modify, freeze transformations. And yeah, so if I go to the front view, now I'm actually in the front view. If I go to the right view, I'm in the right view. Okay. So there's my leaf with a layer. And then environment dome, we did that. Mitt, hand, leaf, wire. Oh, that's everything. So I'm gonna, is there anything else you guys wanted to see, or did you have any questions about what I showed you?
The leaf was good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop screen sharing and pause the video, the recording. Where is it? Here it is.